My name is Moriana Garcia. I am the STEM and Scholarly Communications Librarian at River Campus Libraries at the University of Rochester. And I have been working to support open access for many years now. So what I hope to discuss today with you is how open access is changing academia, and also offer you information that could help you make decisions as you move through that changing environment. Okay, so I'm going to start sharing my screen and go from there. Okay, I hope you all can see my screen. Here is the title of the talk, The New Open Access Ecosystem, Finding Your Niche. So I'm sure you have heard the word ecosystem before to represent the complex network that connects animals, plants, microbes, and the environment. But the term is also used to represent any complex network or interconnected web where changing any of the factors affects the entire system. Open access is such a factor. The appearance of open access is changing academia and the world in ways that are profound and many times unpredictable. Although academia has been linked to the idea of an ivory tower before, blind to the practicalities of the world, I would argue that open access is one of the main factors transforming academia in a more globalized and connected enterprise. The orange open lock above the arrow has been adopted widely as the symbol for open access. So you will see it popping out constantly during my presentation. So the main area influenced by open access is academic publishing. In the traditional system, scholars came up with new ideas or discovered new aspects of the world, and that new knowledge was evaluated by peers, published in journals and books, and collected by libraries, which made the knowledge available to other scholars to feed new ideas and discoveries. The publishers in that equation were and continue to be a mix of commercial, non-profit, and learned society publishers. Academic publishing can be a very lucrative enterprise sometimes. So it is not surprising that some time ago, as this graphic shows, big commercial publishers started to acquire small publishers at an accelerated rate, especially in the natural medical science. Today, 5 or 6 big companies dominate the academic market, with a few non-profit and society publishers big enough to provide some competition, and a sprinkle of very small publishers on the long tail. The consolidation of academic publishing venues into a few companies gave them a lot of power and precipitated what was called as the serial crisis in academia. Many of you might have heard about it. The serial crisis consisted of publishers escalating the price of journals so much that many libraries could not afford them anymore and had to cut access to knowledge that was necessary to their researchers. At the same time, the creation of the internet provided new affordances regarding the availability and mobilization of knowledge. Instead of having that knowledge live in discrete places like libraries, in printed books and journals, it could be available anytime, anywhere in the world with an internet connection. These new affordances made academics and others start to question the traditional way of publishing, where academic authors gave their copyright to publishers in order to publish, giving them complete power over the access to their own publications. A series of open licenses appeared in the market that helped authors share their content in different ways and allowed them to regain some control over their publications. In addition, some academics realized that if they wanted, they could completely bypass the publishers by publishing directly to the internet. So all those changes set up the stage for open access to appear. In December 2001, a grant-making institution, the Open Society Institute, convened a small meeting of people in Budapest to think about the academic publishing landscape and to come up with ideas and suggestions, which were published in 2002. Those ideas were published as the Budapest Open Access Initiative and spearheaded a lot of the change that came after. If you haven't yet, I recommend you visit their website and read the original declaration. In that declaration, they defined what they understood as open access. They are preparing a big bang for their 20th anniversary next year, so keep tuned. So, in a nutshell, what is open access? Open access literature is online, digital, free of charge, and free of most copyright restrictions. And here is where the fuzziness enters, because not all open access resources are created equal. They can have what I call different degrees of openness that depends on the licensing terms attached to them. They can go from all rights reserved, full copyright, to public domain, no rights reserved. Depending on the license, you can just read or copy, distribute, modify, or actually do anything you want with the resource. There are a lot of different open access licenses. Creative Commons are the most popular, but the MIT license is very common with software, among others. So, open licenses set up the conditions under which a resource can be used and shared. Creative Commons licenses are created through the combination of 4 different requirements: attribution, non-commercial, share alike, and no derivatives. They also offer a public domain dedication. So I recommend you to check their website for details on each of the licenses or ask your librarian. I don't have time to go into great detail today. So one of the ways in which academia reacted to open access was through the proliferation of open access policies and the creation of institutional repositories at academic institutions. The policies helped affiliated authors retain copies of their works within the institution, and the repositories became the platforms in charge of collecting and sharing those works. That is how the ecosystem started changing. Researcher funders also reacted, especially government funders. If taxpayers' money had been used to create that knowledge, why should we use more taxpayers' money to buy back that knowledge from publishers? And the idea that open access could be a way to democratize knowledge suddenly took off, with profound influence on government's policies. Of course, the publishing market also reacted to open access with the creation of open access publishers, whose entire output was shared with the world under open licenses. Of course, publishing still costs money, and someone still has to pay. Open access is free to the user, not to the publisher. In the traditional closed model, every user institution or individual had to pay access to the content. In the new model, the publishing cost is paid only once before publishing, usually by the authors or their representatives, through article processing charges, APCs, or book processing charges, BPCs. After that, the content is free of cost to anybody willing to access. The current academic publishing market is a mix of the old and the new model. So you can find journals in all of these models. a lot of them are still on the closed or subscription model, where institutions need to pay a lot of money to access the content. But some publishers are starting to share some of their content in what is called open access bronze, where users are allowed to read, but the publisher keeps all the copyright. Usually they do this for marketing purposes. The hybrid open access model is where you have a subscription journal, so institutions still need to pay the subscription price, but authors can make their own article open access by paying an additional fee. Then you have the well-known gold open access. This is the open access model for open access journals, fully open access journals. Every article in that journal is shared free of cost. In these journals, authors or the representative needs to pay an APC. The next model that is growing a lot is the diamond model, where you have an open access journal, but without APCs. In this case, institutions need to subsidize the publication of the journal. Finally, you have what is known as the green open access, which is the model for repositories, institutional repositories, and other repositories, preprint repositories, where resources can be shared under a variety of licenses, open access, but those repositories also need to be subsidized by institutions. Of course, every garden has its serpent. So one of the problems that came up was the rising of what has been called predatory publishers. Predatory publishers are those that do not deliver what they promise, mostly regarding quality of peer review and publication. I would argue that predatory publishers always existed, but the online availability and the ability to charge before publishing facilitated the actions of some predatory companies. However, it is not that difficult to identify them. So talk to your librarian for some tips. At the same time that all this was happening, another crisis hit academia in what was called the reproducibility crisis. The realization that a significant amount of research results could not be reproduced by other researchers, questioning their validity. The traditional descriptions of methods and results in the literature were not enough many times to differentiate between the good and the bad research. This type of unreproducible research costs a lot of money to researchers that they are trying to advance those experiments, and also forces journals to retract articles when they become unreproducible. So both academics and publishers realized a solution to this problem would be making the data, the code, and the protocols available to researchers as well, not only the article. Many journals now require authors to share their data and code openly when publishing. There are several data repositories available to authors now. Examples cited here are Dryad and Zenodo, and even new standards for data sharing. Open data needs to be findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. This is known as the FAIR data principles. If not, what's the point in sharing? Yes. And it requires sometimes very rich metadata. In addition, more and more researchers are sharing their code openly using open source platforms such as GitHub. A lot of our current research requires sophisticated software to be processed and analyzed, and those should be available to users as well if they want to reproduce the original process. Finally, the Center for Open Science, a nonprofit organization, supports two initiatives that promise to help increase the quality of research: pre-registration and registered reports. In pre-registration, you submit your research plan in detail to a registry in advance of gathering your data, and any changes have to be justified. In registered reports, you submit your methodology to a journal for peer review before gathering the data. If the methodology is approved, the journal makes a commitment to publish your results, even if they are negative, depending on a second review. The number of journals that now accept a registered report is growing constantly. This is an important development especially for social science researchers. I think that there is more and more evidence that open access benefits scholars in multiple areas. Impact, exposure, compliance. For most disciplines, it increases the rate of citation, as you can see in this graphic. I recommend every researcher to actually go and read this paper. For me, it's a classic because it describes all the ways in which open access can help a researcher succeed. If I explain in the graphic, the dotted line is no influence of open access. Anything to the right, my right, your right, I'm not sure, anything to the right shows that open access increases the rate of citation, anything to the left decrease. As you can see, for most disciplines, it increases the rate of citation, with many scholars use as a measurement of their impact. But it's not only the number of citations that increases with OA. The sooner you open your research, the sooner those citations are able to appear. Scholarly articles can have several versions, and there are now platforms where you can share many or all of these versions, with or without embargo, depending on the open access policies of the journals where you intend to publish. How to name those article versions is still in flux, but you can find all these variations in the literature. A preprint is the author manuscript before peer review. The postprint is the accepted manuscript with the peer review revisions, but without the nice formatting. The version of record, the final version, is the final published article with everything, including the nice formatting provided by the publisher. And you will see all these names appearing in the literature. Sharing your preprints, so the author manuscript before peer review, on a preprint server is considered a form of green open access. And there are preprint servers available for almost any discipline now, and some that are discipline agnostic. Of course, the journal where you intend to publish needs to allow for preprints in its policies. Ask your librarian if you want to learn how to do that, or attend our next program in the series tomorrow at 11 a.m. Intro to Preprints. Open access is even changing the way that peer review happens in academia, with many open access journals experimenting with new models. In the traditional model, peer reviewers know who the author is, but the author doesn't know who the peer reviewers are. In the double-blind model, nobody knows who they are, while in the open model, everybody knows who everybody is. The sharing of preprints has started another type of peer review, the post-publication one, where academics and even members of the community can evaluate and comment on the publication. Many authors use comments on their preprints, for example, to improve their final articles. But academia is not only about research, it's also about education. And open access is changing education as well. Open education is a combination of open access, open pedagogy, and open educational resources, or OER. It's a series of tools, resources, and practices that take advantage of open access. For example, open educational resources are a subset of open access resources, whose licenses allow for users to modify them for teaching purposes. Users should be able to retain, reuse, revise, remix, and redistribute those resources. And those are known as the 5 R's from David Wiley, a big authority on the field. There are several platforms that allow educators to share their OER, including open textbooks. So every OER is open access, but not all open access resources are OER. Open pedagogy practices are teaching practices where students contribute their knowledge to the community openly through their assignments. They become academic authors, able to make decisions about licensing and sharing platforms, and allow for the change in assignments from disposable to assignments that contribute to the community. In fact, another great affordance provided by open access is the possibility of opening up research to the community, including journalists, policymakers, and the general public. Open access resources can be shared very easily through social media. Of course, that creates other problems and opportunities. Very complex research needs additional explanations in simple, clear terms, free of jargon, that can be understood by any educated person to avoid misinterpretations. But if it is done well, can extend the impact of your research outside academia. Open access is having an impact on the entire world, with initiatives in different countries being spearheaded by international organizations such as UNESCO, the World Health Organization, and the United Nations. And changes in one place of the world can ripple through the entire planet. For example, the world could not have advanced research to fight COVID in time to save millions of people without open science practices. Researchers all around the world needed COVID information as soon as possible to develop vaccines and medications and to improve treatment. And researchers and publishers responded by sharing their data, their preprints, and the final articles openly. We wouldn't be where we are without open science in this global pandemic. Another big disruption that started in Europe but had global repercussions was Plan S, or Coalition S. These were a group of mostly European funders initially, which decided that research they funded had to be openly shared immediately without embargo. That was a game changer, because although they were willing to pay the APCs, the article processing charges, they initially did not allow for hybrid publications. So suddenly, every academic publisher on the planet had to come up with a plan to publish open in order not to lose the publications from authors, from those funders. Other funders decided to go a different route. Some of the funders in Plan S created their own journals, like eLife, for example. So one of the results of Plan S was what is called as Transformative Agreements. This is something very new that is happening right now in academia. Some publishers responded to Plan S by creating open access journals, while others started the process to flip their current journals directly to open access. But others responded by offering transformative agreements, which are contracts between publishers and libraries or institutions that advance open access by moving money used for subscription purposes to support article processing charges or book processing charges for affiliated authors, for example. So transformative agreements are supposed to help publishers transform their publications to an open access model. They are supposed to be temporary and change as the market changes. Each publisher is coming up with its own transformative agreement. And if you are a librarian, probably you are aware of that. But some of the best known flavors are read and publish, where libraries continue to subscribe to the journals, but affiliated authors publish open, sometimes for an additional fee. The subscribe to open model was put forward by fully open access journals, so institutions could support their authors by paying all or part of the APCs. PLOS, Public Library of Science, it's one of the publishers that offers such a model. Other publishers offer a membership model where a fixed fee agreed by a certain number of institutions is used to finance APCs or BPCs for any author in the future. MIT Press is offering such a model. So libraries all around the world are negotiating now with publishers for those transformative agreements. Researchers use a lot of different terms to talk about open practices in academia. You can think of some of those terms as Russian dolls, where one fits into the other. Open science incorporates most of the current open practices. But if you want to go beyond and be more inclusive of humanists and social scientists, you could use the term open scholarship. And if you want to go beyond academia, when describing these practices, you could use open knowledge. Since I work in academia, I tend to use open scholarship, but all of three are applicable depending on what you are talking about. So sooner than I thought, I came to the end of my presentation, but that will give us plenty of time for discussion. So how to find your pathway through all that change that is happening in academia? Where do you fit in this new and still changing ecosystem? What practices should you explore? Well, I would say that you are in the right place. You are doing the first thing, which is educating yourself about open access. By understanding your options and matching those with your needs and values, you will be able to discover what works for you and what doesn't, and advocate for the things that you need at your institution to advance your scholarship in a more equitable way. So I am now open to questions. Thank you. Thank you for staying with me. And here is my contact information if you have any questions about the presentation or open access in general.